This is a station identification moment. You're listening to CPR Worldwide Media, a division of CPR Media Network, coming to you live right across the planet. Check out our website at www.cprworldwidemedia.com and our Facebook page at facebook.com/CPR Worldwide Media. This is CPR Media Network, coming to you live from the USA.
Well, looky here, a new listener. Hey, this ain't your little sister's radio station.
My name is Christopher Perkins, Captain, United States Marine Corps. I spent 9 years in the Marines and led a team in Al Ramadi, Iraq that risked its lives daily. Today, I'm a managing director at Citi, where I oversee a global team that provides safeguards for the $700 trillion derivatives industry.
Veterans, many of them have the right skills to be great bankers. And when they come in, they know how to make decisions, they know how to take risks, they know how to multitask. All of those things make them really great colleagues.
Just like we would go out onto the streets of Iraq, we would do an analysis of what risk we're taking and thinking about ways to mitigate it. It's no different here.
That makes them extremely valuable, and that's why we want them here helping our clients.
This industry requires our clients' trust. It requires a high degree of integrity. And so, just like the Marine Corps, your reputation is what it is, and your word is very important.
The design of the Ford Escape is clearly intended to grab your eye. Oh, and your foot. Huh, ain't that a kick? The Ford Escape with the foot-activated liftgate. Go open up something interesting. Go further.
However dark the night, however dim our hopes, the light is always there within you.
His family gave him hope.
You fight harder than those other guys, and you win.
His spirit gave him strength.
We're gonna die out here.
We're not dying!
And in his darkest hour,
who is the Olympic athlete?
his faith would not be broken.
Hello, Mother and Father. This will be the first time in 2 years that you'll have heard my voice. I wish you all a Merry Christmas. Your loving son, Louis.
On Christmas Day, experience the unbelievable true story of one man's journey home.
You can take it. You can make it. Just gotta believe you can.
If I can take it, I can make it.
Unbroken, rated PG-13, Christmas Day.
The moment you connect, you're no longer in control.
What does this guy want?
No claim, no statement.
We're facing a nuclear meltdown. This is only the beginning.
Black Hat, rated R.
Read something recently worth thinking about. It's the soldier, not the campus organizer, who's given us freedom to demonstrate. It's the soldier, not the reporter, who's given us freedom of the press. It's the soldier, not the poet, who's given us freedom of speech. It's the soldier who serves under the flag, who defends the protesters' right to burn the flag. Isn't it time now to demonstrate that we support our troops? Were it not for the brave, there'd be no land of the free.
Fred Thompson's message was brought to you by citizensunited.org.
Welcome to the State Legislators Roundtable. Your host will be Charles Kacprowicz, Executive Director of Citizen Initiatives and Countermand Amendment. Our special legislator guests will be discussing important issues in their states that relate to federal encroachment on states' rights. The nonpartisan Article 5 single-issue countermand amendment can remedy many states' issues peacefully without the consent of Congress, the courts, or the executive branch. We will reclaim our constitutional republic soon. The nonpartisan countermand amendment is the missing piece of the Article 5 puzzle. Our nation is coming apart at the seams. So, we are countermanding.
Welcome, folks, to the State Legislators Roundtable. I am Charles Kacprowicz, Executive Director for Citizen Initiatives and the Countermand Amendment. Roundtable discussions with state legislators and community leaders center around critical issues in the states as they relate to federal encroachment on states' rights and how the nonpartisan Countermand Amendment can remedy many of them safely and quickly. This is not a gotcha forum. We are not here to back our guests into a corner. We encourage serious discussions of issues important to our guests and their states. Subjects can include taxation, criminal law, energy policies, health care, social issues, federal land grabs, court decisions, education, executive orders, unfunded liabilities, the EPA, the BLM, the IRS, and many, many more. You will learn how to protect your enumerated rights in the Constitution and how the states and their citizens can identify, define, and protect their unenumerated rights in the 9th and 10th Amendments peacefully and permanently. Roundtable members tonight are Sandy Toth, Executive Coordinator and Georgia State Director, Mike Coombs, National Director and Alaska State Director, and Kelly Gordon, National Coordinator, Texas State Director, and our producer. We now have, I believe, 15 sponsored states for the nonpartisan Article 5 Countermand Amendment. Just today, I had been told that the amendment documents will be filed in the North Carolina House and Senate very shortly, which is exciting to me. Now, we hope to have the 34 by the end of this legislative session. However, we've made a tremendous amount of progress, and this amendment is going to win. We are going to get this through. We have had the honor of meeting many of the country's leading legislators on the State Legislators Roundtable. I see these state legislators more as statesmen than politicians. They are trying to find solutions to the many problems their citizens face, especially as they relate to encroachment by the federal. The State Legislators Roundtable has been growing dramatically. Presently, I believe our audience reaches as many as 100,000 people a week. We have become one of the fastest growing talk shows on the internet. To learn more about the Countermand Amendment, go to countermands.us, that's with an S, countermands.us. Also, call your friends, relatives, and associates. Tell them to tune into the show at cprworldwidemedia.com/live-radio. You can also call in at 956-217-0031. Now tonight we have a special guest. His name is Representative Jason Murphey. He's a young man out of Oklahoma, and he has a very strong heart for doing right for his people in Oklahoma and also for the nation. He's on several committees. He is the chairman of the State Government Operations Committee in Oklahoma. He is on the A&B General Government Committee. He is also on the County and Municipal Committee and the State and Federal Relations Committee. He's a young man who has made a lot of progress with his life already. I expect we are talking to an up-and-comer who we're going to hear more about in the months and years ahead. But right now, I want to introduce Representative Murphey to share with us what is on his mind as he's concerned for in Oklahoma and as they relate to federal encroachment on states' rights. Representative Murphey, thank you for joining us today, and we appreciate you taking the time to spend with us.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to talking to you about these issues and the things that are important for us to discuss.
Thank you, Representative. I would like to give some thought to issues in Oklahoma that are especially troublesome to your state and to your citizens that you also are concerned about. Are there issues in your state that you would like to discuss? There are many in this audience, by the way, who will be from Oklahoma, and I suspect from your district. But at the same time, you will be talking to an audience all over the country. So do you have a particular area that has been of interest to you and that you've been concerned about?
So as it relates specifically to federal overreach, Oklahoma has a unique position, and I think that when most people think of federal overreach, one of the first things which will come to their mind is the national health care proposal and all of the one-size-fits-all unintended consequence that goes with any big federal government program of that type as it impacts state government. And in this specific case, Oklahoma was not one of the original states which joined with, I think it was the Virginia lawsuit against the federal program. We filed on our own right and on our own merit because the voters of Oklahoma had approved a constitutional question prohibiting involvement in the federal program or certain aspects of it. And I think our Attorney General felt that that gave him stronger standing to challenge the federal overreach as opposed to joining with those other states. And it's been a lawsuit which has been under the radar for a long period of time. But as what many regard as the strongest remaining legal challenge to the national health care law goes forward, Oklahoma has some potential standing in the matter because of our separate lawsuit and the fact that it deals with the fact that Oklahoma refused to set up a health insurance exchange, and the creation of the health care law, which clearly never envisioned that states would refuse, but gave them standing to refuse, potentially as a way, of course, of twisting the state's arm. And the fact that we, number one, had a separate lawsuit, and number two, refused to set up an exchange, has put Oklahoma in a strong position as that legal action goes forward this spring and summer, and hopefully resulting in an outcome that will offset the overreach and restore the balance in favor of the states.
That's a good deal of information. Now, one, your state needs to be commended because it's taking action and willing to even make sacrifices in order to protect the liberties and the rights of your citizens, and also to defend itself against federal encroachment in many of these areas, especially in the medical area. I want to clarify a couple of things. As you know, we are, with citizen initiatives, advancing the Countermand Amendment. Now, that's an amendment to the United States Constitution. And why it's important in your case is this. When you file a lawsuit, obviously you have to go through the federal courts. It's going to eventually, assuming that there are enough favorable decisions along the way, it's going to eventually get to the Supreme Court. Now, by the time it gets there, there's almost never a guarantee that you're going to get a favorable decision. And since Justice Roberts has already decided that it is a tax, erroneously and with a flawed decision on his part, what we have now is a Supreme Court that has already endorsed this thing from the standpoint that it was okay for Congress to advance it. On the other hand, it is certainly a possibility that you can win based on the arguments that you're making. I'm not negating that, and I certainly would like to see the states taking more action like you're taking. I think that's commendable. Adding to that, however, is the Countermand Amendment. The Countermand Amendment, once ratified, and I believe we will see this thing ratified in short space. Just today I received news from North Carolina that we have confirmed legislators in both the House and in the Senate who are sponsoring and filing this, not sponsoring, they'd already agreed to do that, but who are now filing it for presentation as a joint resolution for both houses. And I believe we will win North Carolina. But the focus of this, Representative Murphy, is that once it is ratified, and Oklahoma, along with 29 other states, say that the Affordable Care Act is flawed, and either part of it and or all of it should be rescinded. Once 30 states agree with that issue, it's automatically rescinded law. They can no longer be enforced. And that means that with this Countermand Amendment, Oklahoma will have a tool for doing two things: to address laws and regulatory rulings, including EPA, Bureau of Land Management, or even the IRS. You will have a power in the amendment that really trumps the legal alternatives. Because now you're making the law by saying that this Countermand Amendment is going to be ratified, and it will allow you to countermand and rescind laws, either decisions by the courts and or Congress or the executive or regulatory agencies. It will allow you to say, hey, you went too far, federal government. You can no longer go that far. And so with this, you're going to have strength as a state that will restore the constitutional republic that we all want to protect in a way that you've never had before. And because of that, we're excited about it. And we think Oklahoma will be a big winner in this process because of the many issues that you're concerned about that you are trying to address in legal ways as well as statutory ways within your legislature. So there are just some thoughts that you may want to comment on.
You know, I appreciate the creativity in looking for that approach and in seeking to give the state's voice outside of the court system itself as another option to press back. And that's been something that I think we need as far as the creative suggestions and bringing up some of these alternatives. And I know a lot of the specifics can be debated and all of that, but outside the box thinking is always helpful.
When we think about the Countermand Amendment and why this is an approach that, one, does not change the Constitution but protects it through state legislatures, we want to go back and think of our history as a nation. The federal government did not create the state, the states and their legislatures. The federal government was created by the legislatures in 1787. Now, the biggest issue at that time was sovereignty. And when they were working their way through the Constitutional Convention, the biggest problem, even before the deliberations started, was how would the voting take place? And I have said this before, and I think it must be repeated because it's key to understanding state legislature sovereignty, which is derived from the voting citizen. But the fact is that a fellow by the name of George Wythe, he was a delegate at the convention, a very learned, honorable, distinguished gentleman, and he had a committee that he was putting together, and it was for the purpose of deciding how the delegates would vote. The larger states wanted, the more populous states wanted the voting to be based on population. And the smaller states wanted the voting to be based on one vote per state, a Republican convention. Well, with some wrangling and eventual discussion, George Wythe recommended one vote per state, and it won. That became a conventional convention, a Republican convention. Now, that same decision has to be made over and over again at every Article 5 Amendment Convention. That's why it's critical that the state legislatures understand that they have to control the convention. I can't imagine why we would allow as many as 534, 35 politically charged delegates that Congress may summon, who then could be sent by the states. I can't imagine that we could expect anything to come out of them but a lot of mayhem. You'd have 55 delegates from California, you'd have 3 from Wyoming, 4 or 5 from Oklahoma. Now, who's going to win that battle? So even before you decide how the voting will take place, it's been already pre-decided because none of the legislators agreed to one vote per state before the convention was convened. So what we're doing is we are proposing the Countermand Amendment, and with it empowering the states to countermand and rescind laws and regulatory rulings that are burdensome for their state and their citizens and businesses. And at the same time, we provide for them a delegate resolution, which is a contract between them and their delegates. You see, the delegates to an Article 5 convention, Representative Murphy, are not the same as the founders. That's one of the reasons why there is so much confusion out there as to what a constitutional convention is. A constitutional convention, in essence, has the purpose of creating a constitution for a new government. We are not doing that. Article 5 is for proposing amendments. It says so right in the article. It's not for anything else. So to use the term constitutional convention, it's a misnomer. And it creates a big question mark as to who the delegates are. The delegates at the Constitutional Convention did have the responsibility to write a new constitution and form a new government. That's because we were in trouble politically and economically. On the other hand, Article 5 delegates have just the responsibility of proposing amendments. And we believe amendments that are pre-approved by the state legislatures, who are the deliberative body. They're the ones with the sovereign authority to decide what amendment should be proposed. So I said a fair amount. Why don't you share with us, as you would like to, sir, anything that comes to mind regarding these matters?
No, I'd like to hear your take on this some more. Specifically, do you feel that Congress under Article 1 has the ability to carry out the provisions of the Constitution, specifically this case Article 5? And what standing do you think Congress would have if there was a call for a convention to put the restrictions on the convention and the delegate selection process and all that goes with it?
Good question, sir. I think that you're right on target with the question and with your concern. That's part of the confusion of constitutional conventions. The terminology leads to the idea that other entities have influence on the conduct of the convention. But that is not true. The only entities that have influence and control of the convention are state legislatures. No one else. You see, under Article 5, Congress can't propose amendments. We've had 27 amendments so far proposed, and 10 of them were, well, 11 of them were the Bill of Rights, but the fact is 10 of them were ratified within a short 2-year period. But the fact is that 27 were advanced by Congress, and Congress literally said to the states legislatures, they said, we want you to ratify this. You see, Congress couldn't enact the amendment. They had no authority to do that. They had no power, but the state legislatures do. And so when the legislators created the Constitution at the Constitutional Convention, what they did is they created Article 5 at the same time, which was yet operable, because it didn't start to operate until ratified by the state legislatures. And so as a result, when they finally had it ratified, it became a new way in which to protect the existing Constitution, make it perpetual, make it as the supreme document in the country, and still give the state legislatures the right to decide how to address egregious wrongs suffered by the people that the federal government refuses to remedy. So Article 5 is extremely powerful. At the same time, it is defined, and it's for proposing amendments. That's why it's an amendment convention, not a constitutional convention. Now, Congress's role, literally, if it is understood properly by the state legislatures, they have no role. Congress is a facilitator of Article 5. So when the states apply to Congress for the convening of an amendment convention, even Congress calls it a constitutional convention. It is not. But we'll have to tolerate some of the statements that are made simply so that the state legislatures understand that it's an amendment convention eventually. But the fact is, they apply and they say to Congress, we are directing you to convene the Countermand Amendment Convention. And we are going to define how our delegates will behave at that convention, and we will require you to convene this convention within 60 days. And under Article 4, Section 4, we are now asserting our constitutional right as a Republican form of government guaranteed in Article 4. Now, Congress, it's still an application. 28 applications, 29, 30, 32, 33, still applications. But now the 34th steps in, maybe Oklahoma, and they file an application on Congress. That 34th application immediately changes it from an application to an order, to a mandate. So now the states have met their constitutional requirement of getting 34 applications. Congress is no longer in control. All they're doing is facilitating. And now they must convene a convention. Now, it's true, there is an issue that has to be considered by Congress. They are a defender of the Constitution, and they must protect it against foreign and domestic enemies. So they have to look at the applications to make sure that the focus is right. Now, if you in Oklahoma said we want a Countermand Amendment Convention, but someone else in another state says we want a balanced budget amendment convention, and they want them both to count toward that 34, Congress is going to say no, because your purposes are not right. They're going to recognize that proposing amendments means that you have a specific idea in mind, not different ideas. And so when you make the same application, which is what we are encouraging our legislators to do, and send it to Congress, Congress is now out of the picture. Once you have met you, that is from the standpoint of deciding whether or not it should be convened. 34 applications for the same amendment convention means that Congress is no longer responsible for any decisions as far as whether it should or shouldn't be convened. Does that make sense to you, sir?
I think that's been an area of my concern because of the laws that were passed in this. I guess when there was the push for the convention in the early 70s, the U.S. Senate passed a proposal which I think acted counter to some of what you're talking about here, specifically, if I remember correctly, subject to being wrong, of course, that the voting procedure would be probably more favorable to the populous states. And I guess that's where my one of my questions lies. Let's say that the effort to call a convention picks up steam and Congress decides to start restricting and regulating like last time. And they say that under that, I guess it's the Section 8 powers that Congress has in Article 1, they can put forth, they can carry out the intent of the Constitution, including Article 5, and presumably would pass rules that would govern how the delegates can vote, whether or not the delegates can be restricted by their sponsor states, and all of that. How would you see that playing out? Let's say theoretically Congress does pass that, and delegates aren't too happy about it and press back. How would you envision that playing out?
Representative Murphy, I will address that right after the break. We have to go to break now, and I'm speaking now to the audience. We're going to go to break listening to our CPR sponsors and also station identification. Go to countermands.us. Learn about the work we're doing with the Countermand Amendment. If you care to make a donation, there are some donation buttons. If you want to order a copy of our book, my new book, Countermand Amendment, The Missing Piece in the Article 5 Puzzle, you can do so right at countermands.us. Now stay with us. We'll be back. We're going to answer Representative Murphy's question, and we're going to look forward to some real good discussion here.
This is CPR Media Network, coming to you live from the USA.
You know what happens when we take away the late fees and penalty rate? No one misses them. The Citi Simplicity Card is the only card that never has late fees, a penalty rate, or an annual fee. Ever. Go to citi.com/simplicity to apply.
The design of the Ford Escape is clearly intended to grab your eye. Oh, and your foot. Huh, ain't that a kick? The Ford Escape with the foot-activated liftgate. Go open up something interesting. Go further.
However dark the night, however dim our hopes, the light is always there within you.
His family gave him hope.
You fight harder than those other guys, and you win.
His spirit gave him strength.
We're gonna die out here.
We're not dying!
And in his darkest hour,
Who is the Olympic athlete?
his faith would not be broken.
Hello, Mother and Father. This will be the first time in 2 years that you'll have heard my voice. I wish you all a Merry Christmas. Your loving son, Louis.
On Christmas Day, experience the unbelievable true story of one man's journey home.
You can take it. You can make it. Just gotta believe you can.
I can take it, I can make it.
Unbroken, rated PG-13, Christmas Day. The moment you connect, you're no longer in control.
What does this guy want? No claim, no statement.
We're facing a nuclear meltdown. This is only the beginning.
Black Hat, rated R.
Read something recently worth thinking about. It's the soldier, not the campus organizer, who's given us freedom to demonstrate. It's the soldier, not the reporter, who's given us freedom of the press. It's the soldier, not the poet, who's given us freedom of speech. It's the soldier who serves under the flag, who defends the protesters' right to burn the flag. Isn't it time now to demonstrate that we support our troops? Were it not for the brave, there'd be no land of the free.
Fred Thompson's message was brought to you by citizensunited.org.
Mr. President, members of Congress, you've been making a lot of noise about taking our guns away. But you might want to review history. 1835, Gonzales, Texas Territory. The authorities wanted to confiscate the big gun that protected that colony. You know what the people said? Come and take it. Because they were willing to fight for their freedom and their guns. So are we.
Come and take it if you want it. Come and take it if you think you can. Come and take it, but I warn you, you'll have to pry it from my cold dead hands. We want the freedom that God gave us, so you best not cross that line. If you want this gun, you gotta come through us and take it.
One shot at a time. Just like Gonzales, we're keeping our guns.
Welcome back, folks. This is the State Legislators Roundtable. Our guest today is Representative Jason Murphey from the great state of Oklahoma. Jason has been a very pleasant guest. He actually is inquiring into things that many people don't. And he's looking for answers so that he can perform his responsibilities as a legislator in Oklahoma in a more acceptable way. Now, I want to go back to Representative Murphy's comment or question. First, Representative Murphy, for the purpose of helping our audience understand what you're concerned about before I answer, why don't you help us to ask that by asking that question and comment again?
Absolutely. So the document which governs the actions of government, whether it be a state constitution, a city charter, or our U.S. Constitution, usually defines, sets parameters, the restrictions that people put on the government that can only be changed with action by the people, or in this case the states, or whatever the case may be. But then there's usually a provision of some sort which gives the governing body, the elected governing body, the ability to carry out the intent of the, in this case, constitutional provision by putting out laws that govern and carry out the intent. And the U.S. Constitution has one of those provisions in Article 1, Section 8, which allows Congress to make laws to carry out the provisions of the Constitution. In about, I think, 1973, the U.S. Senate passed a law which would govern the conduct of an Article 5 convention, which at that time I think was becoming a real possibility. And in that, if I remember correctly, they tried to restrict the delegates in various ways, or keep the states from restricting the delegates maybe, and I think set the voting procedures, who would have what votes and all of that. And so I'm very interested in, of course, the debate over whether or not that's a constitutional act and Congress has that authority is interesting, but I'm especially interested in, as a state lawmaker who might be voting on a proposal such as this year, how you would see that playing out if Congress tried to say that the states couldn't restrict their delegates, that voting has to be carried out the way Congress sees it and not the delegates, and any number of other things that Congress might try to impose on a convention. I'm very interested in the thought process on how that could potentially play out to the detriment or to the benefit, but especially to the detriment of the states who have issued the call.
All right. Your insights are excellent, and I thank you very much for your explanation. I want us to return to the term sovereignty. Let's remember that back in 1787, the nation was in big trouble. Economically, we were in trouble after we won the war, and we almost lost the Revolutionary War because the states were so independent that it required under the Articles unanimous voting, unanimous consent before they could ratify the Articles of Confederation. Now, we're not going to go into that today. There's an awful lot of detail there that really confirms the simple fact that the biggest issue at the Constitutional Convention was nation-state sovereignty. Now, how did they solve it? They knew that unanimous consent was no longer doable. It almost cost us the war. It was costing us the peace after the war. And how did they solve this problem so the states could join together and allow themselves to have an agreement on what type of federal government would protect them? Well, they did it with Article 5. After they got through all of the other parts of the Constitution, they actually inserted an article called Article 5 that made certain that state legislature sovereignty was never lost. That in fact, whatever sovereignty the states had back in 1787 is still in the state legislatures today. It hasn't been changed. The only difference that has happened is those legislatures simply said to your generation of legislators, we want to make certain that this is a perpetual constitution and that it is the supreme law of the land and that it can be altered in order to address egregious wrongs suffered by the people caused by the federal government. So in essence, they wanted three things. They wanted to protect it for an indefinite period. They also wanted to make sure it was always supreme. They didn't want to see it changed. And at the same time, they allowed a way for it to be amended to express or to modify the conduct of the federal government. Now here's how they did it in Article 5. Instead of requiring the Articles of Confederation unanimous consent mandate, they changed it to 3/4 of the states for ratification. Now they could have, in the time of the Articles of Confederation days, they could have 9 of the 13 states ratifying the amendment. But before that, they needed all 13. Well, today we need 38, not all 50, to make 3/4 to ratify. So the ratification process changed, but it gave a way for the states to have a little bit of give and take. Some states didn't like this, some states didn't like that, some like this, some like that. And now, if you can get 38 states to say we agree, they've got themselves an amendment to the Constitution, and they still retain sovereign authority. Now, it is the state legislatures who are the statesmen. Unfortunately, the John Birches, the Constitutional Party people, the Libertarians, some even Article 5 groups who don't understand that delegates are different under the Articles of 5. They are incessantly bringing about a flawed understanding of our constitutional history. They want you to compromise with Congress. They want you to compromise with the Supreme Court or with the executive or the regulatory agencies. That isn't what sovereignty is. You see, when you ratify a law, which becomes the supreme law of the land as part of the Constitution, the Supreme Court has to obey it. Congress has to obey it. The executive and the regulatory and everyone else, even the private groups like the Federal Reserve, they have to obey that amendment. And the laws that come from them are then determined by Congress and by the state legislatures as to how they will apply penalties on and/or provide other enforcement provisions for that particular amendment as they see it applying to their state. So sovereignty, Representative Murphy, is critical. Absolutely critical. It's not because you guys are dictators. You're not an oligarchy of states. You're simply trying to preserve our constitutional republic in a way that allows you to be independent of everyone else, and yet at the same time have a relationship with the other states that is amenable. Now, with the Countermand Amendment, what makes it so attractive is that when there is a law or a regulatory ruling, whether it's a Supreme Court ruling, Congress, or wherever, when that law is offensive to the states, and then 30 states agree that it has to be countermanded, it is automatically rescinded. So now, as in the case of Bundy in Nevada, You know, and I understand someone said 82% of the land there is owned by the government or controlled by the government. That's nuts. I mean, Nevadans don't even own their state. But the fact is that whatever the law was that allowed the Bureau of Land Management to come in and demand $2 million from Bundy in order to use federal land, so-called, which was Nevada land, that law, if it had been rescinded, would prevented the BLM from doing that. And on top of that, the BLM would be restricted from ever reinforcing that law. So this is the difference between the countermand that becomes a rescission, and then as a result defines the unenumerated right that the states have in Amendment 10, and nullification. Nullification is simply an act of defiance against the federal government, but it doesn't solve anything. Could create conflict. We had a civil war over nullification and over secession. But with Article 5, there's no need for secession. You guys are in charge. You've never changed your ability to control the direction of our Constitution. The only problem is you've had all the yo-yos out there who have said that you don't have it. But you do have it. And what we're trying to do is to get you to understand you must never abdicate. It doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't matter even if you are at odds with all of them. They are the ones who are trying to provide or present a methodology and a process that is not based on state legislature sovereignty in Article 5. That's why we are emphatic about the importance of the Countermand Amendment to make sure that the states are redirecting and restoring our constitutional republic. Does that help at all?
You know, I know and understand so much of that just intrinsically. That's a part of me like it's a part of you. But I appreciate the word of caution coming from specifically the Birch groups, which you mentioned, because they allow us to be deliberative about, let's think about how this plays out. Do we risk having this play out to the opposite effect of our motive and our desire? And I haven't I don't feel that it's a misunderstanding on their part. I think it's really asking us to be thoughtful and deliberative about it, and that's where I had read from their emails that particular concern, and that's what I'm trying to think through. How would that play out? So let's say that Congress does pass this law and approve it, and it puts the states in or especially the states like Oklahoma and the smaller states in a bad position. And let's say that the left-leaning states join the call and send their delegates, and potentially because of Congress's action, the smaller states become outvoted. And I'm trying to think through the risk, and like I said, I've appreciated the creativity with your specific and unique approach, but I'm very much trying to think through the risk that that outside-the-box approach couldn't happen because of potentially, the Supreme Court and the court system weighing in on this, and how would they see it? And,
let me interject something, sir. The fact is that there is no safer way to amend the Constitution than with our Delegate Resolution. You see, all of these issues that are raised about what Congress will do, what the courts will do, how they will actually alter the convention or control that's honestly, my friend, that's nonsense. You control the convention, not them. The Supreme Court has nothing to do with the convention. Congress has nothing to do with the convention. They are a facilitator to convene the convention, that's all. And that also, Iredell is one of the great statesmen of 1787, and a jurist, one of the first jurists on the Supreme Court then, and he simply said, once 3/4 of the states apply for a convention, Congress has no say in the matter. They have to convene the convention. That's how firm he was. And the fact is that these other groups, what they have done is they've misunderstood what Article 5 is all about. They keep thinking it's the same as a constitutional convention. It is not. And their argument goes back to this other flawed approach, which is that when the Annapolis Conference or Convention was convened, and that then converted to the Constitutional Convention, they claim that the delegates at the Annapolis Convention, in fact, usurped the authority of the Articles of Confederation and forced the issue so that they, without the permission of anyone else, transferred the authority they had to convene the Annapolis Convention to the Constitutional Convention, and then went way beyond the directions that they had from Congress at that time and created a new Constitution. That is nonsense. They have a flawed understanding of what happened back then. Forgive me for being so critical of them, but they have paralyzed you guys for almost 40 years. They have literally locked you up from exercising your sovereign authority under Article 5 to preserve this nation. And what they have done is they've said you can't have an Article 5 convention, because if you do, it'll become an open convention, and as a result, we'll lose our Constitution. That's their argument. It's nonsense. How do we address that? We have a delegate resolution. Now, there is a restriction in Article 1, Section 10. That restriction says that the states cannot enter into interstate agreements without the consent of Congress. Well, we don't want Congress in any part of this. This is not their prerogative. We don't even want the governor of the states in this, other than after the amendment is ratified, then the governor and the legislatures can enact laws under the amendment. But the point is that we want the state legislatures to keep their sovereign authority and not surrender it to these other flawed understandings. The Constitutional Convention was unique to itself, and those particular delegates had the responsibility of creating creating a constitution and also a government. And it was under a crisis period. And they succeeded. It was a miracle. Your prerogative today, even though you can change it, did you know that you actually, under Article 5, which is the most powerful article in the whole Constitution, you can change the requirement of Article 5. You can change the requirement of any other amendment that is in the Constitution, because you have the power to propose amendments. But at the same time, for you to get 34 states and then 38 to actually convene a convention and then ratify what comes out of it, when that in fact is damaging to the states and the citizens, that's not very likely to happen. So the power that you have is enormous, but it's not for the purpose of an uncontrolled convention. It's already been defined by the legislatures. It's for proposing amendments. Now, the delegate resolution is the way to control it. Instead of having a contract between the states and violating Article 1, what you have is a contract between the legislature and the delegates. The delegates then go to the convention as ambassadors, not as free agents. On top of that, the delegates are bound by the terms of that delegate resolution. That delegate resolution tells them what they have to do. How do you organize the convention? Well, when 26 or more states have the same kind of delegate resolution for their delegates for the Countermand Amendment, guess what? Now we can convene that convention. We can organize that convention so that it's a Republican convention with one vote per state, automatic, once you get 26 states. Second, it becomes a convention where a simple majority of the states rule, and then it's also a convention that says you have to vote on a pre-approved text that the legislatures have already required, and therefore, because 26 or more states have agreed to that delegate resolution for their delegates, that convention now is predetermined. Now that's what the Republican form of government is all about. That's why the Republican system that we have is always being attacked by the egalitarians. They always want you guys to surrender this Republican authority so that the populace is what rules. No, it can't be that way, or we'll lose this Constitution and this Republic. So I hope that helps, and it is a way that we understand it.
I think if you look at 73, Congress thought they had a role. What I'm interested in is just in visualizing how that plays out if they think they do again. And do the delegates potentially, I can, and thinking through how that would play out, I assume there would be some delegates at the convention to say, hey, we have to play by these rules that Congress says. There would be other delegates who would take the approach that you've talked about. And I'm just thinking through, does that become a litigation? Does it go into the courts? If chaos results, what are the outcomes, and how do we potentially go a bad direction with that, as those who have those concerns have said would be possible?
Okay, it's a good question, good comment. The delegate resolution solves the chaos problem. It solves the mayhem problem. The fact is, if there is confusion at the convention, Congress can't solve it. the courts can't solve it. Because you are dealing in an area of authority now that's sovereign, over and above even the Constitution itself. And they have no say in constitutional matters at a convention. So now, on the other hand, no matter what the government did, the federal government did in passing statutes and laws and bills for the purpose of determining how a constitution should be conducted, it's all moot when it comes to understanding state legislature sovereignty under Article 5. You don't, even if Congress refused to convene the convention, the Countermand Amendment Convention, even after 34 states got their completed their applications, then because you met your, and this is my understanding, you met your constitutional requirements of applying for a specific convention for the purpose of proposing the Countermand Amendment, and Congress is playing politics, then you can convene the convention on your own. There's no reason for Congress to say no, because they're the facilitator. They don't control this process. And that's important to get to get a handle on. The fact is, though, that the Delegate Resolution, when 26 or more states actually approve that same kind of Delegate Resolution, then the state legislatures will not have a convention of mayhem. The 534 politically charged delegates who may be there will be able to have one vote per their state, and that's all. And so the direction of that convention will be conducted and controlled by the states that have a delegate resolution and the pre-approved text for the amendment. That's one of the things that we're working very strongly and very hard with the state legislatures as we travel. And it does protect the convention, but because we have approached a way of looking at this that's contrary to this whole constitutional convention thing, it really is something that is causing legislatures to think twice about what they've been told for the last 30 years. For the last 30 years, even before you were a legislator, the last 30 years, the John Birches and others came in and they went crazy. That's why the Balanced Budget Amendment had 18 rescissions, because they threatened the legislatures with the idea that you can only have an open constitutional convention and we're going to lose our rights in the Constitution. That's what they were saying. And it's your own thinking, because the real issue is proposing amendments. And as long as the states hold firm to a delegate resolution and understand their sovereign position, that convention will be safe. And on top of that, you'll have the option to use this approach, this single issue amendment approach, for many different amendments, including the Balanced Budget Amendment. Even the COS would be controlled by a delegate resolution, you see. But they think that the delegates are equivalent to the founders. That's why they keep thinking constitutional convention, and with all of this other fanfare about we're going to lose the convention and so forth. Go ahead, sir. We don't have a lot more time, but I want to give you as much as possible.
Yes, I had another question, and I apologize. We spent a lot of time on that particular question, but you've mentioned being engaged in the states, and I just want to see maybe if you've thought some of this through at the state level. My experience with this type of legislation has been Oklahoma's repeal of what was then a con-call, and I think that happened in 2009. But then, more notably, as it relates to these types of matters, is our state constitutional convention proposal, which invariably comes up, but has never passed the legislature. And in looking at how that type of legislation goes forward, there's a good deal of thought given into who will be the state's delegates themselves. And one thing I've noticed about those calls is that it appears that there's always potentially what I would call overrepresentation by the government class, those who have become conditioned to thinking that their foremost responsibility is taking federal money, enlarging their bureaucracies, whatever the case may be. And inevitably those proposals have failed, but it's kind of scary to look back at them and see the delineated list of delegate composition. And so as perhaps some of these proposals gain traction and they move through the legislative process, I suspect you're going to see a lot of politics at the state level over who can be a delegate and who can't, who chooses the delegates, what their professional and occupational background is, and all of this. Have you given a lot of thought to this, and can you talk to me about how you envision some of that playing out as well?
Yes, I have. We have. The delegate resolution solves all of that. Remember, you are the ones who will appoint the delegates to the convention, not Congress. All Congress will do is summon them, authorizing a certain number based on the population of the members of Congress. On the other hand, you'll decide how to select them. You'll also decide how to control it. And so when you adopt the delegate resolution with the specific requirements it has, that delegate goes as your ambassador to that convention, not as a free agent. They're not going to go as a Benjamin Franklin or some other great name that was part of the Constitutional Convention. They will go as your representative to do the collective will of the states. That's the difference between what we're doing. Now, how do we solve your selection process? That we can't do that. That's going to be up to you. You're going to have, the legislature will have to decide how they are going to choose the delegates who are going to go to the convention. And that will be totally up to you. The delegate resolution will simply allow you to, once deciding who's going to go, to force them, really, because they can't go unless they sign the delegate resolution, to adhere to your organizational structure and so forth, so that it's a safe convention. So there are two aspects here. One is the work that's going to go on in the state legislatures. That's yours alone. And then the work that goes on at Article 5 at the convention, and that is based on the delegate resolution controlling the delegate, so that it's not a mayhem. It doesn't matter the number of delegates in the other states. As long as we have, I think we're going to get 38 or more states signing the delegate resolution, just to make certain that it's a safe convention. But we only need 26. We only have a couple minutes, sir. Do you have a quick comment to make?
I think as you go into the different states and work on these issues, that should be something of which you're very aware and attuned to. Yet it's important not to view the state legislatures as this uniform body of individuals who are free from special interest influence and all of that and will just do right. I think as these measures advance, you will see, as delegates are defined, that there becomes a tremendous amount of pressure brought to bear on who those delegates would be. And you could easily see government class, special interest class become overrepresented in those delegations. And then once those delegations would be at the convention, they would also be susceptible to the arguments made that Congress does have the right to set those rules. And so you could lose the battle lose the war while winning a battle if you lose the war for delegate composition.
I understand. Now listen, we're up against about 30 seconds. You are welcome to stay over so we can address some of these other problems more directly. I think Mike Coons wants to add to this also, and maybe Sandy. If you've got time, we'll extend this show going into the second hour.
Well, you've been very generous with helping me with content, making sure I didn't have to talk the whole time. So I think that would be just fine.
Okay, go ahead, Kelly, and hold us over till the next hour.
Yes, sir.
Stay here, a new listener. Hey, this ain't your little sister's radio station.
Over the next 40 years, the United States population is going to grow by over 90 million people, and almost all that growth is going to be in cities. What's the healthiest and best way for them to grow so that they really become cauldrons of prosperity and cities of opportunity? What we have found is that if that family is moved into safe, green, affordable housing, places that have access to great school systems, access to jobs, and multiple transportation modes, then the neighborhood begins to thrive and really, really take off. The oxygen of community redevelopment is financing. And all this rebuilding that happened could not have happened without organizations like Citi.
One of the things that we really try to do is to collaborate with people like Jonathan Rose, who are really like-minded and really can also provide innovative solutions to social issues.
And Citi has formed a partnership with our company so that we can take all the lessons from the revitalization of urban America to other cities. So we're now working in Chicago and in Washington, D.C., and Newark.
It's branching off of Jonathan's expertise. And the fact that he has done so many wonderful affordable housing projects, new development and rehabilitation work. And so we were really seeing that there was a need for his skill in areas even outside of New York.
It's amazing how important safe, affordable housing is to the future of our society.
You meet new people, they want to know what you do. And when you tell them your job is to invest in things like low-income housing and schools and healthcare, they're shocked and they're so surprised that a job like this exists in finance. They always say that they had no idea, and then they want to know how they can get a job like that.
The design of the Ford Escape is clearly intended to grab your eye. Oh, and your foot. Huh, ain't that a kick? The Ford Escape with the foot-activated liftgate. Go open up something interesting. Go further.
However dark the night, however dim our hopes, the light is always there within you.
His family gave him hope.
You fight harder than those other guys, and you win.
His spirit gave him strength.
We're gonna die out here.
We're not dying!
And in his darkest hour,
Who is the Olympic athlete?
his faith would not be broken.
Hello, Mother and Father. This will be the first time in 2 years that you'll have heard my voice. I wish you all a Merry Christmas. Your loving son, Louis.
On Christmas Day, experience the unbelievable true story of one man's journey home.
You can take it. You can make it. Just gotta believe you can.
If I can take it, I can make it.
Unbroken, rated PG-13, Christmas Day.
The moment you connect, you're no longer in control.
What does this guy want?
No claim, no statement.
We're facing a nuclear meltdown. This is only the beginning.
Black Hat, rated R.
Read something recently worth thinking about. It's the soldier, not the campus organizer, who's given us freedom to demonstrate. It's the soldier, not the reporter, who's given us freedom of the press. It's the soldier, not the poet, who's given us freedom of speech. It's the soldier who serves under the flag, who defends the protesters' right to burn the flag. Isn't it time now to demonstrate that we support our troops? Were it not for the brave, there'd be no land of the free.
Fred Thompson's message was brought to you by citizensunited.org.
Welcome back, folks, to the State Legislators Roundtable. Again, this is Charles Kacprowicz, Executive Director of Citizen Initiatives and the Countermand Amendment. We are talking tonight with Representative Jason Murphey from Oklahoma. We've had a delightful conversation, a very informative one. He's had some excellent comments and questions, and we're going to continue that in the second hour with Representative Murphy. So hold tight, we've got a lot to learn. Now, I want you to put on your calendar that the State Legislators Roundtable can be heard live on Tuesdays at 9 p.m. and Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can go to cprworldwidemedia.com/live-radio at those hours or in the recast hours, and there are multiple recasts each week. Also, you can go to countermands.us. You can pull down a copy of the amendment. Also, the application is online that we are proposing as a template for the states. And also there's the copy of the Delegate Resolution, which the states are now beginning to adopt for their Delegate Resolution to their state to their delegates at the convention. So you can do that. Lastly, I would encourage you to order a copy of my new book, Countermand Amendment, The Missing Piece in the Article 5 Puzzle. Folks, I've been at this for 41 years now. I've been working on amending the U.S. Constitution either through Congress or state legislatures for that 41-year period. I probably am the oldest, or at least the longest longevity of Article 5 activities, And compared to the others, just about all of them are latecomers. But the fact is that because of that work, we've laid some groundwork, and now we have a way to restore our constitutional republic with the Countermand Amendment. And it is something that's being received very well by the state legislators. Now, right now, I would like to give Sandy Toth, our executive coordinator from Georgia, a chance to respond to some of the issues that our Representative Murphy from Oklahoma has been addressing and asking. Go ahead, Sandy.
Thank you, Charles. I've been enjoying the conversation, and I extend my own welcome to you because it's been a great discussion. But one of the things I see in talking about all of this is the states have been brainwashed into thinking that the federal government is the most powerful and it's very difficult to fight against. But you have to look at what the Founding Fathers did when they wrote Article 5. They made the states the ultimate decision makers about what goes into the Constitution. Whether Congress proposes amendments or the states themselves do, 3/4 of the states have to ratify to make an amendment. So the states are the ultimate arbiters. They decide, and people forget that they have the ultimate power. Because if they don't like what Congress has proposed in an amendment, they won't ratify it. And Congress can go, dance around the Capitol and sing. If the states don't want it, it won't be ratified. And I think we need to turn around the thinking of state legislators to say, you are the most powerful. Okay? However, and we've talked about this in other times, that the Founding Fathers left Article 5 without a lot of detail, without a lot of rules, and that they had a reason for it, because it gives the states the opportunity to deal with things as they need to and set up their own rules. Now, what Charles has said is exactly right, that states can't do a compact together. So coming up with the Delegate Resolution and saying, okay, this is going to control the convention, and everybody else, that doesn't want to follow it can just get out because we're in control. 26 states passing the Delegate Resolution will be in control of the convention. Now, you raised some concern about delegates too, and here is the beauty of the state legislators pre-approving the amendment. Okay? They've already put their stamp on the countermand and said, this is what we want done. This is the only amendment going, so there's no confusion about anything else. And if delegates don't want to listen to the state legislators, they will be recalled, because this is what the states want. No confusion, no sneaking something in the states didn't want. Right down the line, the state legislators will be in control. And they really don't have to worry about what happens at the convention, because it's laid out. You go in, you talk about the amendment, maybe a word needs to be tweaked here or there, and then you all just sit down and vote on it. And that's it. And then you can keep on going with other amendments as the states see fit, like a balanced budget or whatever else. Or we have a great sovereignty amendment you should look at our website. But get the mentality that the states are in control and they are the most powerful in the Constitution. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Sandy. I appreciate that. Did you care to comment on that, Representative Murphy, before I bring Mr. Kuhn in? Representative Murphy, go ahead.
Yes. I believe in that as a matter of policy, of course. It's a states' rights issue, and that particular provision is designed so that a non-responsive Congress has to be subject to an outside process. But it's one of those issues which for years I think you can look and you can see that there was definitely worry about a convention that once empowered and impaneled, there are a million different ideas for amendments to the Constitution, and the concept of having delegations which were bound by forces outside of the convention itself, in this case the states, or seemed less remote than potentially being bound from the Congress. And so as these arguments have come forward and we're becoming aware of them in the legislature and taking a look at them, it's one of those things I think you've seen in Oklahoma specifically, where though those proposals have been sponsored over the last 2 years or so, we've had a hesitancy to just jump on board that bandwagon without some real deliberation and thought, and making sure that some of these as suggestions that the state can bind the delegates with delegate resolution or whatever the means may be actually have merit. And that's where I think that debate is settling in, and we're looking at it, and there's certainly two sides to that, and that's a healthy and deliberative process.
I want to, before I bring Mike into this thing, I want to clarify a couple of thoughts. The issue that you've been addressing, the others that have been either anti-Article 5 groups and or Article 5 groups who have adopted what I'm about to say, that issue is who the delegates are. That's always been the issue. If I see the delegates as equivalent to the founders, then everything that you're concerned about will hold. As a matter of fact, the delegates can do whatever they want at the convention. And they can do it with impunity because they have no one to answer to, because they'd be free agents like the founders were. Although the founders did have to answer to their state legislatures all the same. But at the same time, they were to create a new document. Now, if in fact the legislatures today wanted to change the Constitution to remove it as the supreme law of the land, and also to prevent it from being a perpetual document, then this is what I believe they would have to do. They would have to secede from the Union. They would have to convene their own convention and then create their own constitution and government. Then they can have it, but they can't do that under Article 5. Article 5 specifically requires proposing amendments, and a totally different purpose of amending the existing Constitution. So if we can get away from this flawed thinking of how the transition took place from the Annapolis Convention to the Constitutional Convention, and with the flawed argument that says that there was a usurpation of power over the articles, then we can understand why Article 5 came in later. And that with Article 5, the rules changed. If, in fact, we study the activities of, let's say, a church group like the Southern Baptists, what happens when they send delegates to their annual conventions, whether they be state or national conventions? Well, they don't send them as free agents. Those delegates do not go to that convention with the understanding that they're going to tell the denomination what's going to be reviewed and studied. That agenda has already been predetermined by the denominational leaders. But what they do is they go to approve it or reject it. That's all. That's what you guys have right now in Article 5 with delegates under Article 5 going to a convention. If we see them as free agents, as the other groups do, then you will lose your sovereignty. You will establish a precedent that will make it almost impossible for future generations of legislators to safely, quickly, and successfully amend this Constitution when needed. And by the way, with our delegate resolution, I'd like to add this thought, Representative Murphy, and that is that with that delegate resolution, we believe that this convention, the Countermand Amendment Convention, will finish its business in as little as 7 days. It won't be a drawn-out discussion of delegates, as the COS people argue. It won't be a year or 2 years before they resolve what the issues are. Think about the problem of just with the COS proposal. The Convention of States, they argue that there are going to be 3 general subjects, okay? They are allies of ours, not necessarily partners. But the fact is, they have one subject for reigning in government, another one for a balanced budget, and the other one for term limits. Okay, how do you reign in government? Now the delegates, 534 politically charged delegates, unbound delegates, that's the way they see them. They have to decide what that means. Now for that simple general subject, they have to decide how many subsubjects there will be. Probably dozens of subsubjects, whether it's for Congress, whether it's for the Supreme Court, executive orders, whether it's regular. What do they mean, reigning in government? And then on top of that, under each of those subsubjects, they might have another 12 or more subsubjects. And they'll have to do that for the other 2 categories that they have as well. So the point is, when you send a delegate to a convention that is unbound with a general direction but without specific requirements, the convention could develop into mayhem. Not a constitutional convention, because that's not even permitted. And besides, the states would never approve anything coming out of that. That would be proposed by the delegates. But at the same time, if you have a delegate resolution and the delegate is an ambassador, then what happens, he goes bound to their legislatures, his legislature, and they then can recall him if in fact he is going to violate the terms of the delegate resolution. That means that the legislature remains in control constantly. And that's why it can be saved. That's why it could be in as little as 7 days that this thing could be completed, just one convention. And we could have another convention going on at the same time. I'd love to see the Sovereignty Amendment going on at the same time. And we'll be talking more to the audience about that in the near future. Representative Murphy, you feel free to comment now, and then we'll bring Mike Kuhn into the conversation right after your comments.
I look forward to seeing what he has to say as well.
Very good, sir. Mike, why don't you take the mic now and just share with us what's on your mind?
Yeah, Representative Murphy, in response to the convention, I'm going to read from the Federalist Papers, Federalist 85, Hamilton. This is starting on page 491, going to 492 on the bottom of the page and 491. I answer in the next place that I should esteem it the extreme of prudence to prolong the precarious state of our national affairs and to expose the Union to the jeopardy of successive experiments in the chimerical pursuit of a perfect plan. And I'm going to kind of editorialize there that John Bircher's got this idea that the Constitution is a perfect plan. And even Hamilton understands that that wasn't the case. Goes on to say, I never expect to see a perfect word from an imperfect man. The result of the deliberations of all collective bodies must necessarily be a compound, as well as the errors and prejudices of the good sense and wisdom of the individuals of whom they are composed. The compacts which are to embrace 13 distinct states in a common bond of amity and union must, as necessity, be a compromise of so many similar interests and inflictions. Wait a minute, or maybe wait a minute, I screwed, hold on a second, I jumped page. Which would be undermining the foundations of the property and credit. Wait a minute. Because he talks in here about the Fifth Amendment, the Article 5. He talks in here, and I just lost my place, I'm sad to say, but he talks about how that the Congress is obligated to for under Article 5 to call the convention. They're obligated, and the states are the ones that are answerable to. And I have to find that again, but so Hamilton is really, if you look at 85, he is very specific about Article 5 and what it does and what it doesn't do. And now, going back to the delegate resolution, and I'm sorry, I just completely having a hard time reading this because it's such small print. Going back to the delegate resolution, some of the comments, and Sandy did a really good job on putting this forward. I had a majority leader here in Alaska ask me the same question. Well, how we can control, what's going to happen at the convention? And I said, okay, let's say that the state of Alaska sends our 3 most far left legislators down to be delegates. And I named off some names and they are so far to the left or on my right shoulder, even for an Alaskan. And I said, then you send down as alternates your 3 staunchest, strongest constitutional conservative senators and representatives down as alternates. And the delegate resolution binds those delegates to the state legislature, and that the state legislature within the Countermand Amendment, within the delegate resolution, has the one thing and one thing only for them to vote on, and that's the Countermand Amendment. So let's say that those 3 decide they're going to go off reservation and go over and start buddying up to Bloomberg and Rahm Emanuel and Jerry Brown out of California and all their delegates. And as soon as they do that and they stop listening to what their instructions were, which is to go down there to vote for the Countermand Amendment, the state of Alaska says recall. So those 3 are recalled. The 3 that are alternates come in, and as one body and as one vote, they say yes on the Countermand Amendment. That's the power of you, state legislature, you, the deliberative body, you, the sovereign entity that sends those guys down there. Now, lastly, and it's not something that we talk a whole lot about, there is a section in the delegate resolution. It's called the Credentials Committee. And what the Credentials Committee does, and this is in the delegate resolution, that you, the state of Oklahoma, or my state of Alaska, or any of these states that are doing this, they put together a Credentials Committee that is made up of Senate and House. And that Credential Committee, they're the ones that are overseeing these delegates. So let's say that when the convention is called, and let's say that Idaho wants to change "and" to a comma, or Louisiana wants to change this aspect to this aspect, and they're relatively minor changes, and there's something that everybody can agree to. And let's say it is, okay, we got kind of a general consensus agreement. Those delegates then are going to go back to that Credentials Committee and say, these are the proposed changes to the Countermand Amendment that are being proposed, that we would like to get your blessing on. And if it's not major substantive, it's not changing anything in a negative way, the Credential Committee would then say yes. So then, when you go back, since 26 or more states, 51%, the states had this delegate resolution, then those delegates come back and say, yes, we can vote yes on these changes. And then next thing you know, then you go to vote for the final aspect. It's done. Or let's say that Bloomberg and those guys come in. They say, well, we want to change this to this, and it's wide changing. It dilutes, it denudes the Countermand Amendment. Those delegates, if they need to, will contact the Credentials Committee, and the Credentials Committee say no, but heck no. Or even the delegates themselves could say, we know what the instructions are from our state legislature. We know what the clear intent of our state legislature is. So no, that's going to be a no vote. So since we've got 26 or more states all doing the same thing, Bloomberg and Rahm Emanuel and Jerry Brown, or as Sandy kind of so eloquently put it, get told to go ahead and sit in the corner, keep your eyes and your ears open and your mouth shut. You can vote against this all you want, but we hold the majority. And then if we have, even if we can get all 34 states that are making an application all doing the same identical delegate resolution, when that convention meets and that final vote is taken, you could easily have the 34 and maybe even pick up 4 more moderate states. They're going, we could really deal with this. This is powerful. This is what we can really do to take back our state and our state sovereignty. And then you go from there to then it goes back to Congress. Congress then sends it out to the states for ratification. Within 6 months, year at the very most, and I'm betting more on the order of 3 months to 6 months, you would have 38 states ratifying, and it's done. So as Charles kind of talked about, it's safe, it's efficient, and it's timely at the convention level and very potentially at the ratification level. Does that help you, sir?
I mean, I think it's all, those are all things that I've heard of. I think that those issues, laid out here with us just talking, sound great. But I think once all the special interests get involved, the millions of dollars, the attorneys, the courts, the Congress, the special interest at the state level, when you add 1 million moving parts to this, it obviously gets very complex.
Let me touch on that point, sir, because once the moving parts are going to happen before you vote for that delegate resolution. The moving parts are going to happen before you do the application. Once that's done, there is no moving parts at the convention. That's the beauty of this. There is no moving parts. The only moving parts is the delegates have to vote for that what that state sent them down to vote for.
We are coming up on a break, so we're going to have to cut it off here and come to the top of the hour. We have about a minute. There are 3 things, Representative Murphy, that I'm going to address in the next hour. The politics of it all, which is one of the things you're deeply concerned about. Legalese, convention experience, historical events, which is something that other groups rely on. And then sovereignty trumps all. And we'll discuss your concern, and that is that the big guys are going to come screaming at us. And let's hold that until the next half hour, our final half hour. Folks, stay with us. We are going to listen to our CPR sponsors and station identification. We're really delving into some very, very important aspects of the Countermand Amendment and the Article 5 process. We've all been learning something from both Representative Murphy and I trust vice versa also. But stay with us. We would like very much to continue this conversation, and I think you're going to find the rest of this program very, very enlightening.
Thank you, Charles. Stay tuned, everyone, for a short station break. We'll be right back.
This is CPR Media Network, coming to you live from the USA.
Every Friday morning, they send me out to get the goods. But what they don't know is that I'm using my city thank you card at the coffee shop. So I get 2 times the points. And those points add up fast. So sure, make me the grunt, because I'll be using those points to help me get to a beach in Miami. And all the big shots will be stuck here at the Cube Farm.
The City Thank You Preferred Card. Now earn 2 times the points on dining out and entertainment with no annual fee. To apply, go to city.com/thankyoucards.
The most amazing thing about the Ford Fusion isn't the way it looks. The most amazing thing is the way it sees. With blind spot technology, a lane keeping system, and a standard rear view camera, the Fusion is ready for whatever comes your way. Go prepared. Go further.
However dark the night, however dim our hopes, the light is always there within you.
His family gave him hope.
You fight harder than those other guys, and you win.
His spirit gave him strength.
We're gonna die out here. We're not dying!
And in his darkest hour,
Who is the Olympic athlete?
his faith would not be broken.
Hello, Mother and Father. This will be the first time in 2 years that you'll have heard my voice. I wish you all a Merry Christmas. Your loving son, Louis.
On Christmas Day, experience the unbelievable true story of one man's journey home.
You can take it. You can make it. Just gotta believe you can.
If I can take it, I can make it.
Unbroken, rated PG-13, Christmas Day.
The moment you connect, you're no longer in control.
What does this guy want?
No claim, no statement.
We're facing a nuclear meltdown. This is only the beginning.
Black Hat, rated R.
Read something recently worth thinking about. It's the soldier, not the campus organizer, who's given us freedom to demonstrate. It's the soldier, not the reporter, who's given us freedom of the press. It's the soldier, not the poet, who's given us freedom of speech. It's the soldier who serves under the flag, who defends the protesters' right to burn the flag. Isn't it time now to demonstrate that we support our troops? Were it not for the brave, there'd be no land of the free.
Fred Thompson's message was brought to you by citizensunited.org.
Mr. President, members of Congress, you've been making a lot of noise about taking our guns away. But you might want to review history. 1835, Gonzales, Texas Territory. The authorities wanted to confiscate the big gun that protected that colony. You know what the people said? Come and take it. Because they were willing to fight for their freedom and their guns. So are we.
Come and take it if you want it. Come and take it if you think you can. Come and take it, but I warn you, you'll have to pry it from my cold dead hands. We want the freedom that God gave us, so you best not cross that line. If you want this gun, you gotta come through us and take it.
One shot at a time. Just like Gonzales, we're keeping our guns.
Welcome back, folks. This again is Charles Kacprowicz with our State Legislator Roundtable. And we have our National Director, Mike Coons, our Executive Coordinator, Sandy Toth, and our National Coordinator and Producer, Kelly Gordon, with us. We have our guest, our special guest is the distinguished and Honorable Representative Jason Murphey from Oklahoma, and we've had some really good conversation here. Now, for the sake of our audience, I'd like you to go to countermand.us, find out why this is such an important initiative, why the Countermand Amendment can actually restore our constitutional republic safely, quickly, and of course successfully. I want to read to you a couple of quick clauses in the Countermand Amendment. Section 1. The article restores state sovereignty in our constitutional republic by providing state legislatures countermand authority, which is a form of nullification until such time, I'm ad-libbing now, that 30 states countermand on a particular law, and then it's rescinded. Section 2. State legislatures in the several states shall have the authority to countermand and rescind any congressional statute, judicial decision, executive order, treaty, government agency's regulatory ruling, or any other government or non-government mandate, including excessive spending and credit, imposed on them when, in the opinion of 60% of state legislatures, the law or ruling adversely affects their state's interest. When the countermand threshold has been reached, the law or ruling shall be immediately and automatically nullified and repealed. This countermand authority shall also apply to existing laws and rulings. Now, in here also is an enforcement provision. If in fact the federal government refuses to enforce or prosecute intentional violators of the constitutional rights granted in this amendment to the states, then the state legislatures after 90 days can actually prosecute under state laws. Now, one second. One second. We have a number of issues that we want to cover in this segment, and I think it's important that we give our Representative Murphy an opportunity to state them in a way that we will accurately respond. So, Representative Murphy, repeat what you were saying at the top of the hour regarding what you would like to address.
Yes, I'm, being in the legislative environment every year, I see all of the moving parts at this level. And at times when I interface with groups like yours, where you're seeing it from a very high level, but not necessarily always from at the legislative level, it's easy to see it as good-hearted legislators who want to do the right thing and restore the balance in favor of states' rights. But of course, I see it at that lower level where I live each and every day during session, and I see all of the moving parts, the special interests, the government class, those who are really dependent upon the federal government because they become addicted to the federal money and mandates and the power that goes with it and all of that. And so as you advocate for and draw up, a perfect solution, a delegate resolution that ideally would be passed in its boilerplate form in all states and a certain outcome, which you spend a lot of time talking about and theorizing about and all of that, what I think inevitably happens is that once you get to the level of the legislature and all the moving parts in each individual state, it's going to be very hard to have a uniform product come out of enough states. I think you could see resolutions, some which might be close to your boilerplate, close to what you're envisioning and talking about, others far different, but nonetheless, they're all Article 5 calls, right? So how do you think about reconciling all of those different outcomes in different states and working within the states and really getting a feel on the ground for what's going on in those states?
Well, Representative Murphy, Citizen Initiatives is really the facilitator on the Countermand Amendment going forward in the states. We presently have, I think 5 states right now that are in the process of filing or are going to file, and they have adopted our delegate resolution with their own modifications. We're providing them with a simple template, and they don't have to use it verbatim, but there are certain objectives that we have that we are encouraging them to focus on and to make certain that their delegates are bound to, one of which is how to organize the convention. We want it to be a Republican form of convention and so forth. We've discussed that. Now, as far as the politicking of this and all of the myriad of problems that could possibly develop and more likely will develop at certain levels along the way, I would like to propose this idea. We are dealing here not with a political issue. Yeah, there'll be those who will politicize it, I know that. But we're dealing with a statesman's issue. We're dealing with a sovereignty issue that is to protect states' rights. It's not to somehow cater to some political group or party. It's to to protect the constitutional sovereignty under Article 5 and as a republic under Article 4 that all states have. That's why it's a nonpartisan issue. The fact is that we have states on the left. We have a spokesman who will be on our program from Maryland very soon. We've had another one, a Democrat, a black Democrat from Georgia. We've had a whole host of people from the parties, both parties, that have literally seen this as a valuable tool for their state. So for those in your state who would politicize it and make it or demean it so that it is no longer an issue of states' rights, they would be doing your state a great disfavor. Now there's another side to it. This particular amendment will also allow your state to develop energy in ways that it can't right now. So all of a sudden now you have a right to work methodology here and tool that will protect your citizens and gainful employment for them, because they can countermand EPA and BLM rulings that are burdensome to your state and their citizens. So these are issues that go beyond the question of whether or not I'm a Democrat or a Republican or independent or some other party. It's a states' rights issue, and it's for preserving our constitutional republic. It can address the unfunded liabilities like you have just addressed, dealing with people wanting money from the federal government. That's an issue that those individuals are going to have to work out in their legislatures. But focus on, in my opinion, focus on the states' rights aspect of this, not the politics that you're every day having to endure. The fact is that this is an issue that goes beyond the political aspects for your state. It's an issue that really retains your state authority and sovereignty under the Articles of Confederation. No, I'm sorry, under the Constitutional Convention in Article 5. Now, I would like to emphasize the fact that it also, I'm sorry for the cough, folks, I am getting over a problem here. Hold on for a minute, please. The other groups, Article 5 groups, have an interest in looking to legal precedent, convention experience before the Constitutional Convention, and historical events that they claim will allow the delegates at an unbound convention to be safe. And I might say that I think it's a bit foolish to think that way, because the issue is not legalese, it's not convention experience, which we've never had a convention since the Constitutional Convention, so anything before that is irrelevant. And also, it's not based on historical events. It's based on the sovereignty of the state legislatures under Article 5, which trumps all of it. So in essence, what we have here in Article 5 is a new beginning. It's a way to protect the existing Constitution. It's a way to make sure it continues in perpetuity. And it's a way whereby, if used properly, can provide the amendments that would be needed to push federal encroachment back and restore our constitutional republic. These are important factors that I consider to be central to the whole debate on an Article 5 convention. We can talk about the No Runaway Convention Act. I don't know if Oklahoma has one, but I do know that many other states do, and I'll address that in a little bit if you want. But right now, sir, tell me if I hit the nail on the head with you, or you still have some issues that are not being addressed.
Well, I know I keep doing this, but I'm going to ask you to please take me down that path of Kansas passes your boilerplate. It looks great. Oklahoma, on the other hand, doesn't do that. They maybe pass a limited call, but they don't want to do criminal penalties or anything like that for the delegates or whatever it is, and it's a lot more open. Texas has an entirely open delegation. They have no restrictions on it, but nonetheless, enough states with these very varied delegate limitations or lack thereof, enough issue a call for a convention that Congress certifies and it goes forward. What does that end up looking like?
Well, first of all, I'm starting on this Tuesday, on the 3rd of February, I am beginning a 3-month tour of 35 state capitals to help the legislatures with those kinds of questions and to provide for them solutions and answers that will help to allay their fears. On the other hand, there are a couple of things that come to mind. One, the delegate resolution, which we see as central, does not have to be identical from one state to the other. The only thing that has to be agreed to by one state to the next state is that they want to bind their delegates. That's essential. That they want to make it a Republican convention. That's essential. And that they want a simple majority vote. That's essential. And that they want a pre-approved amendment voted on by the delegates. That's essential. How they put the pieces together is not going to be quite as important, though I would love to see them use our template exactly as is, as some states are. But the fact is, those are prerogatives that the legislatures have to work themselves through. So that's one thing. As far as how to get the states to agree one with another, even with issues like that they want criminal penalties and so forth, this amendment will allow the states, as a matter of fact, let me quickly read part of it. It says, individual states shall have authority to prosecute violators or intentional violators of this article, which in essence would deprive the states of their constitutional rights to countermand. Now, that's I ad-libbed that first part. But my point is, it says shall have authority. In other words, if Oklahoma says, look, we don't want to have criminal criminal penalties or civil penalties against people who might otherwise violate this Constitution. You don't have to have them. You don't have to enforce that part of this amendment. In the Constitution, many amendments have at the bottom of it, this phrase, Congress shall have the authority to enforce the provisions of this article. Congress, in many cases, never does, but it's there. And Congress could put a law together to enforce certain provisions of that article, but they oftentimes aren't. I mean, they may not, and they oftentimes don't, and it's their prerogative. And it's the same with the states, with this legislature. You're given authority in this to do something that you may want to do, maybe not now, but in the future, but you don't ever have to do it if you don't want to. So that's kind of a flexibility that the states have in recognizing the value of the amendment concept, the Countermand Amendment, and at the same time, not having total unanimity between the various states on different reasons for ratifying this amendment. Comment?
But what happens when different states pass different limitations?
Well, I don't believe that will happen. The fact is that
I think it will.
You mean the different applications for the Countermand Amendment?
And maybe they don't even mention the Countermand Amendment. I mean, I think it's unrealistic to presuppose that all of them will. Maybe 2 or 3 do. And then they say, well, technically, if you look at the technicality of it, the states that did ask for a Countermand Amendment Convention did ask for an Article 5 convention. Other states maybe have no limitation. A few states maybe have very specific limitation, but not the Countermand Amendment. But nonetheless, they've all technically issued Article 5 calls. So you potentially could have Congress certifying we've got an Article 5 convention, and the reason is because these calls were issued, notwithstanding the fact that they're very varied in nature and they seek to bind the delegates in a variety of different ways.
Okay, the point that you
because
made...
I think this is the most likely outcome, by the way, just in seeing it. I don't think it's likely, yeah, it's realistic to suggest that your Countermand Amendment gets all of the necessary states, but that you might get a few of them. But other efforts will get other states, because I can tell you that in Oklahoma, I think there are 9 varied calls, and I believe you told me that our chairman of the State and Federal Relations Committee, Lewis Moore, has the Countermand Amendment proposal, but that same committee could potentially hear maybe up to 9 other convention calls of some sort.
Well, the fact is, Representative Murphy, that we could have, you guys could have 100 applications for different conventions. You don't have to have one. See, that's the misnomer dealing with constitutional conventions. The idea of a constitutional convention implies that you can only have one convention. It's for changing the Constitution. But proposing amendments means that the states could have a dozen different reasons why they have to protect their citizens, and they can do it through amendments to the Constitution by proposing specific amendments. That's why the single-issue amendment convention concept is so terribly important with pre-approved text. Now, as far as the states putting different titles on the applications, we are encouraging them everywhere not to do that. We do not want to create ambiguity with Congress as to the purpose of the convention. So of the 4 or 5, I think it's 5 states now that are working on filings, we've already had to deal with that very question with all of them, 4 of them anyway. And guess what? They've all said, we agree. We're going to make it a Countermand Amendment Convention. They see the value of a single-issue convention and not a constitutional convention, and as such are saying that's what we're directing Congress to convene. So I don't think we're going to miss this one now, Representative Murphy. I think we're going to get 34 or more calling for the, applying for the Countermand Amendment Convention, and we're going to do it, I think, by the beginning of next term. Does that answer your question?
How many states have sponsored it this year?
Well, we had 15, and I think we just got 16 recently, and we have many others that we have not had full discussions with. That's one of the reasons why I'm going on this 3-month tour to 35 state capitals. I'm also having book signings for the Countermand Amendment book that we have. But I
Utah,
think based
North,
on...
Sorry, Charles.
Yes.
Utah, North Dakota, and Alaska have filed. We at Citizen Initiatives, we are working to get a clear call application for the Article 5 Countermand Amendment Convention.
And what we don't want to do is to create ambiguity on the part of Congress. That really is the key. And the states are cooperating with us. North Dakota has cooperated with us. I'll be up there next week for 2 days.
Yes, no more debates, no more vague, confusing language. We must get our language clear.
I think the important thing that we as citizens and you as legislators have to understand, this is the way for you to retain control of this constitutional republic, and the federal government can't stop you, local politics can't stop you. As long as the citizens elected you, you have the authority alone under Article 5 to be their deliberative body. Now, I believe too that many who oppose what some are trying to do with this in the states will lose their seats. Up in West Virginia, for an example, there are already some seats being put in jeopardy for those who have adhered to the union perspective, not the union, but the environmentalist perspective on what coal mining is. And as a result, there are probably 100,000 jobs in that state that have been lost. Now, all of a sudden, the Countermand Amendment comes into their hands, and they realize that they can stop the EPA from controlling their energy industry. And those who would advocate to the contrary are going to put themselves in jeopardy. They're the ones that are going to be at risk, regardless of their arguments, because their finances and their business and their jobs are going to be more important than some of those other issues that they've been advancing for the last 40 years. So it's a powerful tool also for the state legislatures to use to retain states' rights and also to gain advantage over those who don't think that it's politically wise to follow it.
Have you thought through the possibility that you get a little traction in some states and advance, say, let's just pick a number, let's say 10 states do countermand, and then other states do different calls, and that's the magic number for a call. At that point, if would you envision that a convention would go forward?
The Countermand Amendment Convention will not go forward unless we have 34 applications from the states to force Congress to.
Would anything stop Congress from certifying a call?
The only thing that would stop Congress is that the states apply with such ambiguity, either with a wrong title, with a wrong stated purpose, with a wrong definition of what a countermand is. If those are the things that the states are, because there are some attorneys out there that just want to get their 2 cents in things, and they create some issues that way. I was dealing with one just recently, but he came our way. The point is that they need to understand that here is a methodology. It's a process that will give the states a very, very safe way to amend the Constitution for the purpose of protecting states' rights and citizens' liberties. By the way, there is one other aspect of this, Representative Murphy, that's very important before we run out of time. There is a National Strategy Committee that we have already formed. We will be inviting you to that committee, along with Representative Moore. And the fact is that that committee is composed of legislators like yourself, and then citizens, and it has the responsibility of identifying laws and regulatory rulings that are burdensome for the states and to their citizens and businesses, and then prioritizing those issues and those laws, and then finally deciding which ones should be countermanded. Now, citizen initiatives as a citizens group will be responsible for facilitating that decision. The legislatures will authorize it, but we will facilitate it to secure those 30 countermands from the states with context that we have in the states. That's a very, very important part of this whole strategy. And the reason is because, hold on for a minute, but the reason is by doing it this way, we don't violate Article 1, Section 10, which then says that the states can't have interstate compacts without the consent of Congress. Well, this is not an interstate compact. This is a body of citizens and legislators, and they are not controlling their legislatures, but they are voting on the direction of these amendments and or countermands. That's very, very critical. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, in answer to Representative Murphy's question, if you go to our website, countermands.us, there's a tab on there for the Countermand Amendment, and along with with that is the application on the United States Congress calling for the Countermand Amendment Convention. I won't go into all the whereases, but the key aspect to this, and this is where we need 34 states having the same language, would be resolved by the legislature of Oklahoma, that the United States Congress convene a single-issue convention called the Countermand Amendment Convention for the sole purpose to decide, sole purpose being key, to decide if the proposed amendment should be sent back to the state legislators for ratification. Congress is directed to convene the Countermand Amendment Convention within 90 days from the date it receives the 34th call for the Convention of the States. That's the key aspect. If another state comes up with another application that is a resolution for a balanced budget amendment, or be it resolved of three, like COS has, the three broad subjects, or any of the other ones, those don't interrelate with this. They would have to get their own 34 states to make that call for that specific application. What we need with this is we get 34 states all doing the same thing with the same call, with the same application. Once that 34th hits, that's when it convenes the convention. Hope that helps.
We're coming up on a close. Representative Murphy, please comment as you would like to before we close here in a couple of minutes.
No, I certainly appreciate you fielding my questions. These are questions that I expect I potentially will ask Representative Moore if he brings this bill forward. I sit on his committee, on the State and Federal Government Relations Committee, and I think he's the sponsor here. So these are questions I potentially have of him, and I thank you for answering them and for spending so much time with me today. It's a lot to think about and to think through, and I know that you've spent a lot of time on those answers and crafting them. And as you think about some of this and going forward, please don't hesitate to connect with me and give me additional insights. And again, I'm just very curious in how some of these things play out, and we look forward to seeing your answers to that as well.
Okay, we're going to have to close. I have the custom of closing with a short prayer, and I'm going to do that in a moment. But the fact is that the people who are part of citizen initiatives are really patriots. They are not screwballs. They're not trying to create revolution. They're trying to prevent it. And the Countermand Amendment is going to be a tool for allowing us to redirect the affairs of this nation safely. All right. Lord, we come into your presence. We thank you for this conversation. We thank you for this discussion. We thank you for men like Representative Murphy. We thank you, God, that he's looking for answers. He's trying to find the right solutions, and he's trying to do it with safety. But Lord, we need help. We need encouragement. We need strength. We need health. We need finances. We need resources. We need people. And we trust you for that, because it is our hope, Lord, and it's our purpose to see this nation returning to you again as a God-fearing people, which we are not right now because of the sins that we've committed. So we ask you to give us that help, to give us the ability to make this a success